Yo, hey, check this out.
You're gonna learn today.
Welcome to this week's edition of the Lakeside Chat. I'm your host, Brother John Muhammad. Here we always talk with community figures, political leaders, and everyday people. Today we're honored to have our guest candidate for City Council District 6, Sister Maria Scruggs. And that's just what she is today. I mean, many other hats and lots of things that you do in the community. I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Okay,
but we're here to talk about your candidacy, and thank you always for coming.
Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Yes,
always a
yes.
pleasure being on Lakeside Chat.
And so, first question for those who may have not seen the other one is always, who is Maria Scruggs?
Who is Maria Scruggs? Ooh. Maria Scruggs is a lifelong public servant. Have been in the public arena wearing many, many hats. Of course, I'm a trained by education. I'm a criminologist.
Okay.
With a background in law enforcement. Working now on the correction side and the community corrections in Orange County. But that public service has spanned from public housing director to community planner in Childs Park to project director for Sisters for Breast Health all. But the common themes, and it was a calling that I knew at 16 years old that I would have, is that I was called to serve. Right. I have never been in a position where I've made a lot of money or got a lot of backdoor deals. Right. My success and my personal wellness has always come from the ability to be able to use the gifts that God gave me to help others.
Excellent. And so with that, what inspired you to run now for the city council seat for District 6?
It was a natural progression, knowing that this seat was going to be vacated by Carl Nurse, that after coming back to St. Pete in 1987, I came in hitting the ground running. Of course, I've run for public office. Right. This would actually be my 4th time. Okay. And again, when you talk about continuation experience, it's a continuation of my 30 plus years in public service. Right. And District 6 has taken on a very unique characteristic. Yes. In that it is not now majority African American, which is historically the case. It's been historically the case. Right. So the needs are very, very diverse, and I think the beauty of being in the public arena for so long, what you learn how to do is to manage people with different backgrounds, people with different needs, people with different strengths, and people with different challenges, and that's what makes me a very viable candidate, because I have the track record, in spite of what some may say. I am a bridge builder. I would not be able to accomplish the things that I have been able to accomplish alone. You just can't do it.
And you kind of answered it. That because that was going to be the next question, is what makes you think that you'll be able to win, and what gives you the advantage in the district. But I think you addressed it. It's I mean, and I see every candidate as a viable candidate, because we've seen some interesting politics in the country. Yes, and Lord, you can't count anybody out. No, sir. No, never would you ever hear me say nobody is a viable candidate. I do think, though, in this race, experience, there isn't even a discussion. By mere age and experience, that's a given. I think, but it's not just the age, it's not just the experience,
it's just in those 30 plus years being able to produce tangible results for people.
Right. You got a record.
You got a record I can stand on.
And with that, you know, in conversations around the city, particularly in that district, economic development is always the hot topic. So one of the things that I like to ask is, what does true economic development look like for you, and what would be your plan to implement it?
True economic development for me is when you can visibly see that the economic improvements, whether it's education, whether it's small businesses, whether it's entrepreneurship for individual entities, whether it's jobs, whether it's the environment, which is for me a part of economic justice. When I see the people that are that are part of that community, not people that come in, but when you see the people and the businesses that are inherently a part of that community rise up and be able to take advantage of the economic initiatives or opportunities within the city, county, and state, that's true economic development.
Yeah, because a lot of times they see it as bringing like a big box grocery store. We've seen that happen twice and not work. Livable wages has not really been a topic of conversation, so I appreciate what you said, and like you said, the holistic, and you can see the people really tangibly. And so what would be some of the things that you would see yourself doing to bring that about?
One of the things that's right on which is a natural progression with me is I had a meeting with the Chamber of Commerce on the day that I actually filed. I filed February 3rd at 8:03 and 8:15 I was at the chamber. And the reason I was at the chamber is because I've never understood, since I've been back in St. Petersburg, when we talk about economic development, why the chamber is not a part of those strategic conversations in the African community, when we know that the people that make the decisions about the money and how money moves in St. Petersburg are part of that chamber.
Absolutely.
And that we tend to talk a lot about social services when we talk about economic development in our community, and while we know that's a part of it, that cannot be the hub of it. We have to be in strategic discussions with the people that know what's coming into this community, and then preparing our community to respond appropriately. When we brought Tropicana Field in here, we did not prepare business owners to take advantage of those opportunities long term. We had maybe Garnell Jenkins in as a business owner. We had, I think, the Atwater sold some collard greens. But at the end of the day,
that's 100.
That's what makes people get upset with me. And they promised that they gave us some trees, some palm.
On 16th Street.
16th Street. I was there. I was a witness. And the business
put a sign that said it's going to be a business district.
That was, and I think a couple of businesses got a couple of new awnings and some paint that you never really could tell. And I'll never forget sitting in that meeting with my one of the people that I love very dearly was David Welch, and who invited me to the meeting. And when the city planner, whose name I will not call, he's long gone, but when he told them that we were going to get this $500,000 for these palm trees, I'll never forget looking around at Mr. Welch and said, "You all are kidding, right? You all are not going." And he said to me, as well as some of the other business owners, Red Snack Shack, and all, they said, "Maria, you just got to be patient. We're gonna, we got to crawl before we can walk." And I said, "Okay." Well, now I'm almost 60, and we still crawling. I'm just, at some point, how patient am I to be? And while I knew that was very new for them back then, there is no sense for somebody who's had the benefit of those wise men who often brought me into their counsel as a mentee, as mentoring me. There's no reason for me to make the same mistake. I should have learned from that, and I did. And I think there are people that recognize that I did learn from that, and there lies the problem. Is there really, really a political will for this community to succeed economically? And when you ask me about specifics, we have what is happening right next to District 6 that they're called Innovation District.
Yes, yes.
They have this Grow Smart District. I know that Agenda 2020 is mentioned in there, but for me, I needed to see a strategy that said we have X number of jobs coming in Innovation District, we have X number of business opportunities, so we're going to develop a strategy that's going to tie the residents and the businesses next door to it in Midtown to that where they can walk. They don't have to walk. We recognize the challenges we have with transportation,
Absolutely.
but we sit right next to Innovation District and to the Innovation District, and I'm thinking there is something wrong.
Right.
And I had a very, very good meeting with Chris Steinoker and Jim Donatelli, the chairman of the board, and I think that they were pleasantly surprised to see that there were folks that really needed to talk about, because if you truly want the sun to shine on the entire city, it's very important that when we're talking apples to apples and oranges to oranges.
Yes.
We're not talking about social services in the black community when we're talking about economic development. We got to be talking about people that are going to be earning livable wage jobs. We got to be talking about business opportunities to enhance the businesses that are in the community. And you all know that I was on that and still will be a strong advocate for early childhood education providers, because that is the largest block of business owners that we have in South St. Petersburg. And if we are not paying attention, they will slowly be closing up, because the requirements to run a early childhood education facility these days is very complex and it's very expensive. And we made unfortunately one of the very thing that I fought the hardest against, I had to end up doing and convincing the board, not convincing, but our board agreed to. We had to transfer the ownership of Happy Workers. Because when we looked at we had to manage our reality, and we knew what was non-negotiable was for Happy Workers to close. We knew that could not happen. We knew that we could not disrupt our babies and the legacy that some of those families that have you had 3 and 4 generations of children and families, and that means something to black people.
And what we can do is let me do this, because that's a great segue. I want to talk about Happy Workers. What we'll do is we'll take a quick break, and then after the break we'll talk more about what happened with Happy Workers, the importance of early childhood development, and then other things that are pressing in the district. So we'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to the Lakeside Chat. I'm your host, Brother John Muhammad, here with candidate for District 6 City Council, Sister Maria Scruggs, and we're talking about her candidacy and a lot of the issues that are facing our community. And before the break, you mentioned Happy Workers and the things that were happening. And going back, it was this whole social media misconception about what was happening with Happy Workers, and so would you mind spending? I mean, we don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, but if you would mind sharing what happened with Happy Workers and what's the current status of it at this point?
Absolutely. As you know, there was a major social media frenzy that Happy Workers was getting ready to close, and that is not the case.
Okay.
What the board did, I think we've made it publicly known that between October the 27th of 2016. April. Between April 27th, 2016 and October 14th, 2016, we racked up 4 violations relating to supervision of children.
Okay.
Our board policy was automatic termination for the staff.
Okay.
But what that means is when you're diminishing your staff, you're diminishing your enrollment.
Right.
And we recognized that we had some challenges within the leadership. We recognized that as a volunteer board, that if we kept going trying to manage this ourselves as a volunteer board, that we would eventually close the school. We would be strapped with debt. So the board identified several priorities that were non-negotiable.
Okay.
And what was non-negotiable was the institution closing.
Right.
What was non-negotiable was losing the name.
Yeah.
What was non-negotiable was those people that needed to be employed losing their jobs.
Right.
And ultimately what was important was for our babies not to be displaced.
Right.
And everything else, what we had to do was decide as a board is to make a decision to sell off our properties that we owned on 18th Street to help cover some of the debt that we had as a result of the reduced enrollment.
Okay.
And ultimately transfer the ownership of Happy Workers to our club.
Okay.
And we will be launching a major renovation because our club is a nonprofit within the community. They were the better fit. They were the closer fit because they are an independent nonprofit.
Okay.
Trying to link to any other institution, we would not have been able to accomplish what we've been able to accomplish as far as transferring ownerships of assets, the kind of decisions that needed to be made at the local level. We couldn't have done that with another entity.
And is the board going to stay the same?
The board will not. It will be Happy Workers will come under the ownership of our club.
Okay.
And it will be, the school itself will be called the Happy Workers and Our Club Learning Academy.
Okay, gotcha. Gotcha. Awesome. Well, thank you for that history, because, like you said, there was a lot of assumptions and just outright lies and falsehoods about it. So
it was amazing to me that there were individuals that really leaked that and the things that were going on behind the scenes to break it all to happen.
Right.
And again, once you get into this game, you recognize what the hearts of people are sometimes. Right. And I thank God that He gave our board the wisdom to be able to lead us and guide us in a way that we recognize we had to compromise. And like my doctor said to me the other day, that she was so proud. She said, Maria, because you didn't allow your ego to get in the way. This is something you've been fighting for, but what you recognize is you did not have the level of support in the community to own that institution that took hundreds of thousands of dollars for renovations. And our club has been able to come in there with, they've been able to get support that we frankly could not get. And so for us, the bottom line with our babies and the institution and the history of that institution to remain alive.
Excellent. All right, so back to the campaign.
Okay.
In the city, one of the other things that we talked about, and we talked about this with other candidates, is crime statistics nationally are trending down, but the feeling of public safety in some areas, particularly in South St. Pete, still needs some work. So with your background in law enforcement, what would be your approach to public safety and addressing it, not from a statistical standpoint, but from just the way that people feel about public safety in the community? How would you address that?
Well, I feel bad about public safety, and I'm in. And one of the things that we tend to do is look at these issues in isolation. But when people are unemployed, underemployed, when their children are not being educated, when they see themselves systemically and statistically being left out, the sense of anger, disempowerment, especially when you see that we are such a wealthy country and we're such a wealthy community, but there's a pot of people that are still being disengaged. And what happens is when you look at law enforcement from strictly a law enforcement, but it's the crime is trending down, but what you see is a manifestation of young people just being outright, let me just put it, not just young people, but you see people of color being frustrated and ultimately going to what they may even feel like they don't have a choice. Our choices that mean, okay, I got to take care of my babies, I got to get it, I got to hustle. We know what that looks like when we live in the neighborhood. And of course, when we talk about the number of children that are running around that are stealing cars, and I have the 200 plus that are pretty much the ones that are committing most of the car thefts. And when I look at that, I said the issue, you can't enforce this.
Yeah.
You've got to look at the economics of this.
Right.
And the economics of this is why are our babies able to do this, and why do we have the same 200 plus that's stealing cars on a regular basis, and very little to nothing is even attempted. And I came to the table offering a very targeted kind of strategy that would have looked at most of how do we engage those young people, because as long as they are not being engaged at school, as long as they cannot find a job that's going to pay them a livable wage, they're going to do something.
They're going to do something.
Yes. And so crime statistics really don't give us what we really need to know. What we really need to know, and the closest data that I've looked at that comes to addressing where we are as a people is the Alice report that the United Way just put out. And it's real. You got us out here working, and I tell people, when I say us, because I would be considered to be in the neighborhood with an income of at a certain point, and let me miss a paycheck and see what's happening. It is not going to be pretty.
That's for a lot of people.
That's
one paycheck away from being on the street.
One paycheck, Lord have mercy. And I live on Melrose Avenue. So if that's what my reality is, imagine what somebody who be maybe making $10, $12, $13 an hour, their reality, and they have children to feed, and they have 2 or 3 children to feed, and imagine what their reality is going to be like.
And then you talk about trying to get them involved in things, because we had a meeting the other day with the sports leagues, and the Rattlers and others, and that's one of the challenges. It's like, I'm already struggling, and then it's $150 to enroll these children into these basketball or football programs, and you got 3 children. Where you going to find that money to do it? So those are very real, valid.
When I was the project director for the Child's Park Youth Initiative Council when Davry Green had the vision of doing the Child's Park Rattlers. And she came to a community meeting, and I was talking about what my vision was for Child's Park and how we would engage the community. And she didn't believe me. And I was talking about how and I don't want to say we empower people, but how we give people the resources and the technical assistance they need to do what they're trying to do for their community. And we happened to be, our birthdays were the same day. And we got to be best friends when she saw, she really means this. And she's really putting the work in to show me what needs to happen for Child's Park to be all that it can be. And that was, what year is this? Maybe 20 years ago.
Like 96. 94. In between that, I remember that was the pool,
the Child's Park Rattlers. And what I said to Davry back then, I said, Davry, the families that are going to come here are not going to be able to afford this. The registration fee. So what we have to position ourselves to do is to be able to go after monies that will cover this. I saw that 15 years down the road, and it was just unfortunate that she passed on. It was unfortunate that JWB saw the need to transfer me to Ridgecrest. Because they really, I would guess it was the residents were a little bit too empowered. And
we started peeping the game, as we say,
and they
where the money
really control. No, the residents really control the money. They really were. They didn't have it in their hands, but what they wanted, and once I provided the support they needed to get it where it needed to get to, it took me about 6 months to get permission from FAMU, because when she brought me the name, the Child's Park Junior Rattlers, I said, okay, well, do you have the permission from FAMU? She said, no. I said, oh, no, you can't just use the, and I think that was about a 6-month process to get the funding. But when we got it done, it was done, and that team went on the field without having one debt. Everything that they raised from concessions and anything else they did was their money. And it just bothered me to see. I've heard over the years how things have changed, and that the struggle, I've heard about families not being able to pay the registration, and that was certainly not the long-term plan.
So what we'll do is we're going to take another quick break, and then I want to talk, you mentioned community engagement and you're working that, and I want to talk more about that and how we can engage people around this election, which is August the 29th. Make sure you go out and vote, and we'll be right back with more from the Lakeside Chat. Welcome back to the Lakeside Chat. I'm your host, Brother John Muhammad, here with candidate for District 6 City Council, Sister Maria Scruggs. And we talked about community engagement, some of her work over here in Childs Park, along with the many other things that she's done. And what I wanted to pick up on was community engagement. You know, particularly in our community, for council races at this time of year. I mean, we had our national election, it was what it was, but people don't usually come out for various reasons. And a lot of people say, well, politics doesn't really matter, they're going to do what they want to do anyway. So what is your plan, or what would you say will be a way that we can engage our community to make them see the importance of being involved in this process?
Well, first of all, what we have to do is we have to recognize that people are being very honest and truthful, that politicians have done what is going to be in their best interest and not the best interest of the people.
Right.
The one thing that we're doing is, of course, the grassroots. We've got to be knocking on people's doors, particularly in our neighborhoods, trying to get them involved and let them see what is in it for them.
Right. Right.
If you're not coming into what's in it for me, that's keeping it real. That's what people are in it for.
That's right.
They've heard all the promises, they've heard all the lies, then they don't see the candidate no more until the election time.
Yes.
And one of the things my saying has been to people is, I can only tell you, my philosophy is pay attention to what people say, but pay closer attention to what they do.
That's right.
So if you, well, I can tell you, I got a record and showing you what I have done to engage the community and the results that have come from it.
Right.
And so only by being on the city council, it means having access to more resources to be able to help engage my community. So, and I mean in all of District 6, so that people see, because what I found very interesting, I made some assumptions, but in the conversations that I've had in downtown, which picks up a portion of District 6, I'm amazed at the people that don't know what district they're in and don't know the city councilman. And again, that's what happens when you make assumptions.
Yeah, you figure that they know and that they're engaged and they're super voters. And, right.
Not necessarily the case.
Wow.
Not necessarily the case. So, and the only way that you can really determine what people's needs are, you got to talk to them. You got to get out and talk to them. I'm a little bit challenged in that I work in Orlando, and so I'm pretty much restricted to the weekend.
Like Wonder Woman. You got to change. I remember we talked about that. I was coming from Clearwater, so I mean Orlando's a different story, but I know that Clark Kent by day and trying to be Superman, you know, by night, it's definitely a challenge.
It's a challenge, and that's why, I mean, I've been running since 1987. Since I got back, so what I can show people is I'm just deciding to come and start trying to talk to people about the needs of our community. This has been something since 1987, and this is just another position that gives me even more influence and access to be able to bring the resources that we need in our community.
One of the things with being on council, you know, it takes 4 votes to get something done. So how do you see yourself working with the other council members and being able to get them to second your motions and, you know, to go along with the programs and the initiatives that you start?
I see it as a relatively easy task. I tend not to govern by emotions and feelings. I tend to govern with facts and my knowledge of the public arena. And those things that I don't know, I research, and so it makes it difficult when you make a plan for people when you can present a plan to people that demonstrates, number one, the fiscal conservativeness of it. I'm a Democrat, but I'm a fiscal conservative.
I think all black people are. we come up watching that dollar. Right.
We don't have a choice.
Right.
When you talk about the benefit of a particular project having its maximum benefit for a group of people, it's not a pet project.
Right.
I think it makes it very difficult for people to not support it.
Right.
And again, my agenda, I can never come to a body expecting it to be about my agenda.
Right.
I'm always going to come with the people's agenda.
Right.
Always. I tell people all the time, it's just a no-brainer for me. And it's just a continuation of recognizing that you are representing a very diverse district, and the most important thing is not only hearing your constituents while you're running, but even more so once you're in the office.
Right. And so with that, thinking about, talking about governing and just looking at the makeup of council right now, what would you say would be some of the biggest opportunities with our city council and city government, and then what are some of the biggest challenges that we're facing, and how would you address those?
One of the biggest opportunities, I think, is for me to have an opportunity to engage council at their level.
Yeah.
I think sometimes when people are on that dais and you come in as an average citizen, there tends to be a different approach and reception to you.
That sight line is this way too, right?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, sir.
They have you looking this way, but once you're looking level, it changes the dynamics.
It changes the dynamics.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's an opportunity for people to get to work with me in a different light.
Right.
And an opportunity for me to work with people in a different light.
One of the biggest challenges.
I think probably one of the biggest challenges that I anticipate early on will be some administration resistance.
Okay.
To accountability.
Right.
I had a great compliment from Alan DeLisle when he introduced me to his wife. He says, the one thing I can tell you about her, she does her research.
Yeah.
So, and many times people that are elected to council are very new to the public arena, and there's a level of intimidation by these long-term staffers who in the councilman's eyes, these people are huge because they've done this so long.
Right.
And while I would certainly agree that they are very, very, very knowledgeable, the beauty of being able to have worked in the public arena is I share some of that knowledge.
Right.
So you kind of know how the bones are buried.
Yes.
Where to dig them up and in a nice way to say the
awesome.
folks. Yeah.
I appreciate that what you just said too, because a lot of times people think that it just happens on the dais, but a lot of the work is done with city staff, because those are the ones that actually do the job on a day-to-day basis. And that's one of the things that a lot of council members and even elected officials aren't prepared for, is working with the staff to get things done. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's difficult if you've never had that, if you've never worked in the public arena. I use the analogy that if I just woke up today and said, okay, I want to be an anesthesiologist, and I go into the operating room, and I would know the scalpel from the suture from this, and there would be such a steep learning curve for me to be able to operate on somebody and hopefully be of some service, that I don't put them to sleep or put too much. What's the stuff you knock them out with? And it's just and why would the public be any different?
Right.
Why would we not want experience? Ideas are wonderful. I've got a whole lot of ideas about a whole lot of stuff that I know absolutely nothing about. So I tend not to go into that lane because I don't have the basis on how to operate it.
Right.
What I feel very comfortable with is a level of understanding the public sector, understanding the trends over the last 30 years, and then understanding and having the skills and competencies to be able to be an effective member of the body, because it is not glamorous.
Right.
I look at some of these councilmen and the hours that you're on that dais. That is not glamorous thing. Anybody, if anybody think that's cute, it is not. It is work. And not only, and it's only part-time. And then that's not including the other public boards that they serve on. So it's not kind of like the ideal job from that standpoint, but it is what makes it glamorous is the opportunities that you have from access to resources and information to be able to help your community get the resources that we deserve and should have had long time ago. I think we're somewhere at now we're probably over the $400 million, but we have expended in the public a lot of resources in South St. Petersburg to include Midtown and Childs Park. And those of us that grow up here and live here like, where is it? Where is it? And the truth of the matter is most of it went right out of
it came in. It was a filter that went back to other people. So what we do at this point is, we're going to begin to wind down, but is there anything that you'd like to say to the audience and, encourage them, and why should they vote for you?
Absolutely. One of the things that I think is very important is for the residents and voters in District 6 and the constituents of District 6 is to recognize by voting for Maria, you have a person who has demonstrated that she has a heart for this community. It's not something that I've just talked about. It's something that I've done in my many, many roles in the public arena, and that with focusing on the three areas of economics, education, and the environment, and beginning to look at a shift in our community that looks at our community in a comprehensive approach as opposed to looking at us in silos. I am the candidate who by far has the experience, has the track record to be able to do that. That makes a difference for the people in District 6.
Excellent. And do you have a website or a way that they can learn more about the work?
I do not have my website up. I certainly have a Facebook up, and my Facebook manager is going to kill me because all I can tell you is to go to Maria Scruggs, Maria L. Scruggs. Sorry, Hillary. That is one of the challenges, is they have a terrible candidate for technology. And we're working on the website and really trying to assess whether it's. My question is whether it's economically feasible. While I think a lot of people use technology, I'm not sure a lot of the voters use technology. So it's always nice.
What's the best way to get to the voters that you're trying to reach, as opposed to having a .com and say you have a .com?
I have a .com. There you go. Awesome. There you go.
So we always thank you for coming by. This probably won't be the last time. We got a primary coming up on August the 29th. Make sure that you go and vote. The registration deadline is July 31st, so please make sure that your address is up to date. If you've moved, anything has changed, you got until July 31st to handle that. And then the primary, once again, is August 29th. Thank you again for tuning in.
We also want to remind voters in this primary for District 6, you will only be able to vote for me if you live in District 6.
That's right.
That I think there has been some confusion with people thinking citywide. If I come out of the primary, you certainly get to vote for me citywide. But for the primary, it is only for those people that live in District 6.
So if you don't see it on your ballot, check what district you're in. All right. Thank you again. That's a great point of clarification. All right. Well, that's it. Please make sure you share the page. Go to facebook.com/Lakeside Chat. And as always, we encourage you to continue to believe and do good.